up next, we have Hong Kong versus New Zealand. Let's go ahead and meet our teams. Our first. Representing Asia Pacific, please welcome Hong Kong.
Und der tut hier so schön erstrahlen, in seinem...
Hong Kong is represented by...
Look at the record of this team, Blizzcon and Kin in particular.
Ja, das kann jetzt lustig werden. Ja, verdammte Scheiße. Verschwendet! Magier gegen Priester. Warte mal, ich hol mein explodierendes Schaf.
A deck that's being played in the HGG finals at Blizzcon.
I knew it. I lost to the tutorial so many times. It's the most overpowered deck in history. Murloc Raider is just too strong.
Klar.
It's just bizarre to look at this one. It feels like I'm looking at a tutorial.
Like, and that was a hand that you could very much consider keeping. That was a 1-2-3 curve.
Na, das ist ja beschissen jetzt.
You just kill them.
Sieht Alex krasser, ey. Das kann dauern, bis man die jetzt ausspielt.
No Duskbreaker, no Pyromancer, no Cleric in sight. They're gonna have to play very defensively.
Es ist immer so schön, dass die Karten manchmal so beschissen gesetzt sind.
Yeah, Blitzstone here clearly indicating that the fear he has of cards, like you said, Wild Pyro, Northshire Cleric as well. Like Murloc Raider, there's a reason that 1-mana 2/1s in Hearthstone historically have not been tier 1 cards. You need something more efficient at fighting for board, which is now 1-mana 1/3s. Its Crystallizer, Diamol are good enough to be played, whereas Murloc Raider, you're showing here exactly why it's not being played too often, because he threw it. He had a 1-drop on 1 and mulliganed it away.
But Shack Attack currently has no way to deal with the Bluegill Warrior. He can't actually deal 1 damage now this turn. So it's going to be dealing another 2 next turn, and Blitzchung is going to be in a fantastic position once he drops Nightmare Amalgam. That's a 3/4. That doesn't die to Dustbreaker. Yeah. And then he's got the Megasaur to follow up with. This is looking scary for New Zealand.
Really tough choice there as well of the Shadow Visions, where I was, you would typically expect against any kind of a board-faced deck to see Psychic Scream. Just clear up the whole board, even if they have the adaptation for Death Rattles or Divine Shield, anything like that, you clear it off 100% of the time, completely clear board. But this shows how it is not only a very board-focused deck, it's an incredibly aggressive deck, this Murloc Mage. If they were to stick Gentle Megasaur or a Murloc War Leader, you're going to die way before you have time to throw down the Psychic Scream.
What do they do this turn? It's just hopeless. Just drop Acolyte of Pain.
Yeah, I imagine they'll probably end up just playing the Acolyte, because Wild Pyro, you need it to do something a little bit more impactful. I think maybe if you can draw a Power Word Shield off the top, maybe they just ignore the Acolyte of Pain as well if they're feeling incredibly aggressive. And then you can just draw a whole bunch of cards in the meanwhile.
I can hear Murloc noises in my head. I look up and there's these 2 life-size, well, larger than life-size Murlocs just by the casting area.
Yeah, you'll be glad to hear you are not going completely insane. Those are real Murlocs.
Yeah, real Murlocs?
Real Murlocs. Yeah, I'm losing my mind here. I am going insane. As the Duskbreaker pickup is a really fantastic way to start clearing off this board. Even if it doesn't immediately get rid of everything, just being able to mop up with the Wild Pyro afterwards is the dream.
Wild Pyromancer Coin Mind Blast is looking like it will do the rest of this job. Jack Attack will be taking some damage in the meantime, but maybe then they can stabilize.
Maybe.
I mean, yeah, Stargazer Luna is in Blitzchung's hand. He's got the Book of Spectres to start digging through the deck. New Zealand are in a rough spot.
And this really is just the big decision for them, isn't it? Do they go Dustbreaker this turn, or do they go Wild Pyro this turn? I think they're coming to the conclusion that a 3/3 on board is just better. Yeah. You don't get any, there's no chance that the Wild Pyromancer gets more procs next turn.
Right, I mean, if they're playing Pyromancer here, what are they doing? Just Pyromancer Coin? Then the Nightmare Amalgam survives the Dustbreaker the following turn. So Pyromancer Coin Mind Blast, but then they end up with nothing on the board. This is awkward.
Yeah, it allows them to develop
Cleric heal.
the Northshire as well.
That is not one of the plays that I'd spotted. I like it, but there's still 10 damage on the board, including the hero power.
Well, like this, looking at the board, like if you just ignore what's on their side of the board, then it gets a bit more awkward because Dustbreaker doesn't even kill off the 4/4 Amalgam. When you take into the fact that they are actually going to have to clear off these minions, lest you just trade in with them, Dustbreaker does become a little bit more appealing here, and maybe it means you don't even have to go for Dustbreaker, because by healing up the Wild Pyromancer, the hero power can't take it out anymore from the mage. So maybe they can just go for Master Spell, Power Word Shield if they draw that off the top.
The future is ours.
Oh boy.
But here Hong Kong are realizing what their opponent was likely deciding between and playing beautifully around it. This is such a good spot here from Hong Kong, and this is the punish from New Zealand. By going greedy and not getting the Dustbreaker when it was good enough, they are now being punished pretty hard.
This Dustbreaker only deals with one of those minions.
Yeah.
And now Luna, depending on what is drawn now, it's not the best minion. Obviously something that costs 1 mana would have been ideal in this situation. It's not bad by any means.
And this is a difficult decision that often comes up in this deck, also similar to when you're playing with Divine Favor. Do you draw the maximum amount of cards possible and not develop on board as effectively, or do you get a little bit of extra board development, the extra 1 attack on the Tidecaller, and give up the immediate card draw? I think it makes sense, and it has worked out very nicely indeed here for Blitz.
It has. However, Wild Pyromancer Mass Dispel will deal with most of the damage that's on the board. It will leave only the 2 Murlocs alive. It will leave only 4 damage alive on the board. That's okay, I think, New Zealand, and that's even better than the Mass Dispel.
This is the easiest turn of their life now. That Divine Hymn is such a big pickup, and this is not a facet of what their play originally was intended to do. By playing these, the Wild Pyromancer first, only by drawing the second Wild Pyromancer and the second and the copy of Divine Hymn would they have the chance to even deal with this board at all. And that is such an unbelievably impactful draw, turning this game around so drastically.
Right.
And now, because of the fact that Murloc Mage is so more minion-based, so much less spell-based, the ability to come back into this game from Blitzchung is quite severely diminished.
It's difficult. I definitely wouldn't count them out just yet, though. The fact that the Pyromancers on the board is awkward because they are going to want to deal with that.
Yeah.
If it weren't, they could just go Nightmare Amalgam, Murloc Raider, Cold Light Seer, and just create the biggest board possible. Are they going to go for that anyway?
No, they've got it.
But still, Jack Attack may not be able to deal with these, and the next turn War Leader plus Cold Light Seer would do a lot of work.
I mean, I imagine he's probably just going to be quite happy to lead off with a Cabal Shadow Priest. This doesn't really warrant a Psychic Scream quite yet.
No, Psychic Scream is incredibly valuable, and unlike Odd Paladin, Murloc Mage can only go so far in terms of resources. They have no magic button that creates 2 1/1s every turn.
They do, however, have a Luneth and the Book of Spectres as well, which is a card that people have been trying to make really work for a long time now, and it seems to have finally found its home in Murloc Mage. Just an incredibly powerful tool, which is exactly what they will need if the Psychic Scream is to come down.
As long as it doesn't just discard both Fireballs and Frostbolt. You can't build a deck for this card.
Das ist schon duster, das ist doch nicht mal so weit, das ey.
It's not a realistic ask. Yep. As you predicted, Cabal Shadow Priest is going to come down. Again, remove 2 damage off the board. Create a board of New Zealand's own, which can start to deal with anything Hong Kong plays.
And as good as this is looking for Jack Attack, this turn for Blitzchung This is just kind of good. You go Cold Light Sea and Murloc War Leader ping. That's a big old board you made. Oh, obviously the other way around, yeah, to get the health buff. But it gives you a really nice strong hold onto the board. And even if you're met with the Psychic Scream, which Blitzchung is fully expecting to happen with this play, Snap Booker Spectres refill the board and try and get that pressure to pull things back in your favor.
Oh, ist doch nicht viel.
Not even going to
besser.
Of course not. This is like a face deck. This is Blitzchung we're talking about. One of the premier aggro players.
And again, if they are playing around Psychic Scream, then what is the purpose of trading? What does that actually achieve for them?
Good point. Just the alternatives for Jack Attack here, where he maybe doesn't want to go for Psychic Scream. If we were to see Mass Dispel, that leaves 5 damage on the board after a trade, which isn't that bad. It's definitely worth considering just going with the Mass Dispel instead.
Like Straza. Damage for the next few turns, I guess. There you go.
Worth considering, but obviously I think I'm letting Cast Division get to me a little bit, where I can see the Book of Spectres in hand.
Right.
New Zealand have no idea that's there. They're thinking this is probably the scariest board we're likely to see for a good long while.
The Cabal Shadow Priest drawn. Seems to be the case quite often, actually, that one of the cards that got Psychic Screamed in is the first thing drawn. We saw it earlier with Tundra Rhino.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? It's like a perfect social experiment of like positive bias.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
oh, this happens every single time.
It only happens every single time when it benefits my opponent.
Exactly. That's just Hearthstone.
Ah.
As once again, a board where
Tja,
you
das weiß man noch nicht.
Psychic Scream again. We've seen this so many times with Control Priest, where with these modern aggressive decks, it's not. It's always the potential of what could come. It's not what you actually see on board. It's just knowing they could play Murloc War Leader. In Paladin, they could play Level Up. They could play Fungal Mancer in Zoo. There's always something potentially that could come down, which makes you want to go for your powerful removal that little bit too early.
This second War Leader is going to do a lot of work, though.
Oh, yes.
Buffing both these minions, so that's going to be 8 damage on the board. The Fireball is 6. The Ping is another one after that. Yeah, we're almost there.
And New Zealand will clearly be figuring out breakpoints here. What do we lose to? Double Fireball, they need to hero power. Fireball Frostbolt, they're still alright, so they don't need to hero power. They really want to be cycling through to the better cards in their deck and kind of baiting their opponents into getting as much damage through to face as possible so they can Alex Straza back up out of range afterwards. Ooh. I think that was a little bit of orange. That is going to do it. The Murloc Mage, with its constant ability to refill the board. Book of Spectres, War Leader, this constant damage closes out the game.
Alles klar. Alter, da hat sich der Magier 2 Fireball aufgespart und hat es somit schnell beendet. Punkt an Hongkong, natürlich. Das war das Gleiche. Sachen sind irgendwie immer ganz vorne. Es gibt mir irgendwie zu kämpfen. Krieger gegen Jäger.
It's so tempting. There's so much stuff that just shuts it down. They're like Super Collider. A bunch of 5/5s line up very poorly against a Super Collider, and you don't have an ooze in hand to be able to deal with it. I imagine we see like a half and half here, where they'll keep the egg and maybe a couple of the Death Rattle activators, but here they're saying, alright, usually you're looking for Katharina, you're looking for Rexar, the real powerhouse cards in this matchup. But this hand is so intensely synergistic, they're just gonna smork this game out.
And why not, if they think they've got the opportunity to win it quickly? Because the alternative is having to rely on drawing Deathstalker Rexar, and that is one of the things that can go slightly wrong for the Hunter. If they just fail to apply enough pressure early and then fail to draw the big things like Rexar, like Cube, and then like the Playdeads, it can all go a bit wrong. Katharina is a nice little backup plan for if this early pressure does get dealt with, she can get slammed on turn 8. I believe that they are running a charged Devil Saw in this build. Yes, they are. Rather in the kind of flex Swamp King Dread slot, I guess.
Yeah, we see a lot of different choices being run. Sometimes the Savannah High Main that we saw earlier, as you said, from Bulgaria, the Swamp King Dread.
Oh, they're not running High Main at all here, are they?
Yeah, it's the traditional 4 beasts, I think, is usually what you try and find, with the 2 Grizzlies, Crush, and something. I think it was it Alex recently I saw just playing a 3 beast build, which is an interesting way of going about it, much less consistent, but you don't draw cards from your hand, because you don't want to play Charged Devilsaur. It's not a particularly powerful card. You just want to get that damage through to face. So for Ting Tong, finding the Katharina at the start is exactly what he's looking for. And I also think it may very well have influenced his decision to not go coin Devilsaur Egg here, because that was a real consideration, right? If you go coin Devilsaur and then Terrascale next turn, that's a good amount of damage that you're putting down onto the board. But going coin Katharina on turn 7 is probably what this coin is going to be designated for now. And I mean, unless they want to go coin Playdead, but I would be surprised to see that.
That's some selection of taunts that that Ken got there.
Yeah. I guess they could actually go coin Playdead and then, yeah, Terrascale Playdead.
It's looking like a nice curve, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess this does work out nicely. It's there's a big question mark in the middle though now between turns 4, like turns 5, 6, and 7 before you get to Katharina. You're not doing a whole lot with this hand right now.
Just thinking, they can kind of play around Super Collider next turn with the positioning of the Terrascale.
Yes,
if they play the Playdead first and then stick the Terrascale in between some of the 5/5s. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
It's good enough just to get some of that damage through early on. But even then, you know, this isn't a board that has that many Death Rattle minions on it. It's just going to have a lot of Devilsaurs, which means Brawl or Reckless Flurry would make very quick work of all these Devilsaurs. And then New Zealand are left kind of high and dry for a few turns.
Also, having used both Playdeads and the Terrascale Stalker potentially, which are some of the key cards in this matchup. Playing those on cube later on, that's how they win the game.
Yeah, it is. But I've seen some of my favorite ever games I've seen played with Death Rattle Hunter have been specifically not playing Terrascale Stalker on cube in this matchup. Because of mind control tech. You just need to be so careful of not playing 4 minions at once. But here Ting Tong is playing into exactly that, because when you keep this hand, you have to. You can't keep this hand and play around mind control tech when you're keeping 4 Death Rattle activators.
So is it Brawl time? Nope, it's Super Collider time. And this is fine actually, because he can hit the rightmost Devilsaur and it guarantees that there's only 1 5/5 left. Yeah, King doesn't really have too much to worry about at the moment.
Now Ting Tong needs to think, well, do you make another Devilsaur here and put the Spider Bomb in between the 2 of them so that it's a little bit more difficult for the Super Collider to clear it up? That is a lot of damage that you are forcing the Odd Warrior to take. But that generally just doesn't matter that much in this matchup. You have to have such a ridiculously powerful early game to have any chance of just pushing them out with pressure early on.
I just feel as though he has to hold back at this point, because the Playdead again is so vital later on with some of the bigger tools.
And this is why I was advocating at the start a kind of half and half mulligan, when you keep the egg, maybe 1 or 2 of the Death Rattle activators, and throw away a Playdead, because you want to find other cards in this matchup. Katharina, you want to find Deathstalker Rexar primarily, obviously Egg, Prince Keleseth as well. A great way to get this game rolling, and they just don't have most of those cards now.
But yeah, I mean, they kept both Playdeads and only planned on playing one, in which case, what was the purpose of keeping the second one? Maybe they had planned on playing both and were hoping not to see Super Collider?
Yeah, I think they might have planned on playing both, but they found Katharina as well, and now they want to pull out King Crush or another Grizzly, which makes sense, because that's a much more powerful Death Rattle.
Ach, Kinderchen.
And it has finally caught up with Kin. He's left without the ability to really mop up this board all too effectively, so it needs to make what are some increasingly unimpressive plays here, like just Direhorn Hatchling, which can get munched up pretty easily by the Spider Bomb if New Zealand will want to. So United players as well. Still playing around the mind control tech as much as possible. They only played into it on one of the turns now, I believe. And by trading away the Spider Bomb, they keep the play dead for maybe a Devil Saw or a Katharina as well. Or maybe a Spider Bomb, sorry, or a Katharina.
The game's really slowed down here, and that is to the detriment of the Hunter for the time being.
Na, wie sieht's da aus?
The longer the game goes...
Wie sieht's da so aus?
Well, I was gonna say in theory the Warrior wins, but then it depends when Rexar's drawn, I guess.
It very, very much does. It also depends if the Warrior is able to find a respectable answer for Katharina, because at the moment, it doesn't really. Like, Brawl, if you're at a low life total, is not a good enough answer against Katharina. You're just going to be hit with a King Crush, or from where they're sat, maybe a Charged Devil Saw afterwards. You just take too much damage.
There's only 2 beasts left for Ting.
Irgendwann ist alles
A
drin.
very real chance that he draws one of the other 2 before he can play Katharina. There's a chance he draws both.
And again, lovely positioning with the egg here. This maybe is one of the biggest reasons to keep the explosive egg starting hand, because the premium way to remove stuff with Odd Warrior now is Super Collider.
Yep.
You take
Oh
a
God.
ridiculous amount of damage while doing it, but you don't care because you have the hero power to pull yourself back up. And that egg in the middle, with some really nice positioning from Ting Tong, is just making this impossible for King to effectively
Und
deal with
irgendwann
his
kommt eine
board.
ganze Parade von diesen
Again,
Sachen.
it's just minion development, trying to put stuff in the way, which is not a long-term solution, because eventually Kin is going to run out of minions.
So, 23 health for Hong Kong. Okay, they're gonna go ahead and Hunter's Mark in immediately. I like that. I was looking at the Spider Bomb and thinking, is it worth going Spider Bomb play dead?
Yeah.
Just to push this 8 damage through to the face? But Hunter's Mark, and I guess even Ziliax works pretty well.
Well, they're just really trying to play around mind control tech, I think, at the moment. Because especially going into turn 8, that opens up a really nice 3-drop, 5-drop play, where we could see mind control tech at least, mind control tech into, I don't know, maybe a Dynamatic, if that could be made to work for Kin. Because even if the egg is stolen, that opens up the Super Collider to actually start clearing off the board. And it is just so at the core of New Zealand's game plan, this strategy. When do they play around mind control tech, and when do they say, we just can't do it anymore? And here they're saying, we're going to give you a relatively unimpressive board to steal with the mind control tech. If you steal a 3-2, that's really not that bad, because next turn, slam the Katharina and really start pushing some damage. Exactly.
So, Brawl still available to Kin, no mind control tech. Shield block, Reckless Flurry clears everything apart from the 5-5 that comes out of the egg. Well, he could Super Collider the egg first, then go Shield block, or sorry, Super Collider one of the minions next to the egg, the Grizzly. Then go Shield block, Reckless Flurry. That would clear everything.
It's not bad. Again, though, you have to be expecting Katharina. Like, the card on the far left at this point, I imagine Kin will be expecting that to be a Katharina.
Right.
Because it wasn't played earlier, which means it's probably not Rexar, because that would have been played as soon as possible. But it was kept. Exactly. It was a card that was kept off the mulligan. And there are very few cards that could be. Maybe they've got the read that it's a Playdead or a Terrascale Stalker.
It's funny how, like, when you have a game plan and you change that game plan... that works too. And you change your game plan after the mulligan, it could mess up with your opponent's read of your hand. Like, when you go so many levels in to the extent that the pro players do, Hearthstone gets pretty complicated.
Was that the best way to do it? You go... this way lets you develop the Grizzly, actually. Okay, yeah. This is really nice, actually, because if you ignore playing the Taunt, the way we were looking at, where you attack in first, then go shield block, Reckless Flurry was better, but that only leaves you 2 mana left over to go for a hero power, which is good, but setting up this Taunt protects you from King Crush, and that is a beautiful read of the situation from Kin, realizing you are likely to be hit with a Charged Devil Saw or a King Crush next turn. Because if your opponent has Katharina, they're playing Katharina. Yeah,
that's very smart. These Hunter's Marks for New Zealand aren't doing much at all. Okay, so with this, New Zealand guarantees a King Crush next turn, because if they don't get it from the Katharina, they can play dead.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, this is a good setup.
Morgan can do about this charged Devil Sword? He could faceless it and just charge back into it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't believe there's a way of removing this.
What now?
It's crazy.
There's nothing off Dr. Boom that you could make work unless you got the zap cannon and then attacked him with your weapon as well.
Or the microbots.
Or the microbots, yeah.
2 out of 5.
Probably not worth considering. You really want to save this swing of the old Super Collider for a little bit more value. So I think you're probably right. It's looking like a faceless manipulator, maybe with a shield block first, to try and find the shield slam.
Wow, he's looking at Zola it.
Really?
Of all of the cards, you'd want an extra copy of in your hand. Charged Devil Sword?
That is a very interesting play, as now for Ting Tong, I would have to imagine it is finally Katharina time. King Crush going to be hitting the board. And the playdead that we were talking about from a while ago, saved right from the start, is coming up pretty big here. Well, he's actually wondering if he should bother, because if it gets removed, you kind of want the death rattle.
Well, yeah. I figured the reason he hovered over Play Dead is because he'd already seen it was Witchwood Grizzly that was summoned. Because I don't really see the benefit in summoning both of them, because then if the board gets cleared, Katharina doesn't proc.
I think here, though, what Ting Tong's realizing is, I said if the board is cleared. The conversation they're having now is, how is the board cleared? What combination of cards completely clears up the board? If they'd gone for Play Dead and Brawl leaves up like any of them, it would have to be exactly Witchwood Grizzly survives for New Zealand to not be dead.
Well, Dr. Being Reckless Flurry would have been clearing the board. No, it wouldn't have dealt with the Witchwood Grizzly.
Yeah, there'd still be something in play.
And then Kim would have no armor, and Ting Tong would just win. So yeah, okay.
I guess this does make sense, though. It's just the bane of control warriors since the dawn of time is these death rattle minions, be it Ken back in the day, or Savannah Highmane, or now the obvious Katharina is just such a pain to deal with.
Das volles Leben und der Krieger ist fast nur rechnen.
That does mean now the removal is struggling to be found. It would have to be Hero Power Reckless Flurry here, or a Brawl and pray that there's no minion left inside. There's just the other Witchwood Grizzly is in hand. Yeah, he's going for the Brawl. You can't remove your armor with Reckless Flurry, or you just die way too much at the time.
Playing the Play Dead last turn would have lost to this, but...
And that is going to be the game. Pretty swiftly closed out here by Ting Tong. Their style of play here, of going for a very aggressive start, not the usual way of playing this matchup, has worked out beautifully for them. It meant that at all times they were not falling behind. And then they didn't even need the death corrector because they just run through tempo. It's not the traditional route.
Neuseeland hat gerade gesiegt. Jetzt steht's 1-1.
As that is a pretty decent hand for Hong Kong.
Hexenmeister gegen Magier.
Man, that has just been the bane of Murlocs since day one of Hearthstone.
Has to play very early though. Like once there's a Murloc or two on the board, the how out of control the Murlocs can get does mean that the Doomsayers don't tend to survive for long.
Thankfully, it only costs 2 mana crystals and therefore can be played relatively early.
The key thing about Doomsayer as well, like, and this is something we've been saying for years now, is not just that it clears the board, but it clears the board at the start of your turn, allowing you to then spend the crystals, you to put your own minions on the board and then the Murlocs have to contest with that. So the little tempo switcher effect that the Doomsayer has is very powerful.
And it'll be interesting to see how Shy plays it, because if Mage just plays Grimscale Oracle on turn 1, does he just slam Doomsayer? I would definitely imagine no, now that the Plated Beetle has been found as well, to be able to ramp up the amount of damage there. But for Mage, this is a really nice starting hand. It's no Tide Caller, but it's good enough to get the damage rolling a little bit.
Both of these hands are looking good. It's just a 1-1 on the board. Like Hong Kong are going to have to decide, do they want to play this Doomsayer now? And they kind of have to, because if they don't play now, when is it ever going to proc?
Oh, you think you're playing the Doomsayer there?
I think he had to consider it.
I think the plated beetle here is just too
But yeah,
good.
beetle contests with this so nicely that it is going to prevent beige from getting too much stuff on the board.
Like, 2 cards were kept in the mulligan, and neither of them was Tidecaller, which you would obviously play over the Grimscale Oracle.
Right.
And so I think you can have a pretty good expectation that one of them is Rockpool, because that's a very, very powerful Murloc card to keep. It's kind of the core of the Murloc strategy at the moment.
Yep.
And therefore this is a brilliant play into Rockpool Hunter.
If New Zealand coin out Murloc War Leader here and make that trade, then Doomsayer is going to be pretty miserable for Mage to see.
I imagine they do go coin Murloc War Leader. I'd be surprised to see anything else, just because you need to start locking down the board here, and it's unlikely they have the Doomsayer. Hong Kong is only running the one Doomsayer. It's very, very unlikely to see 2 Doomsayers in this deck anymore.
I wish we had players named the same as the class more often. It makes it very easy to cast.
That's true. We're all trying to refer to it as the players more, but with Mage, you just you can't go wrong.
Well, Mage has gone wrong here, as that Doomsayer is going to do its job, taking out a Murloc War Leader, setting up Shy nicely for next turn. Shy even has the ooze to deal with a Luna.
Then the other benefit you were talking about with Doomsayer, in that it gives you initiative onto the board, the freedom to develop.
Right.
This is the awkward thing now for Shy.
Yeah.
Does he just jam the acidic Swampoos onto the board?
He can't do that. Surely he can't do that.
It's like, you have to develop onto the board though. Maybe they have a Luneth, but I think what's more likely to happen is you just get obliterated on the board. They just start to overrun you, and they very possibly won't play into Defile. This is a Murloc deck, so it's obviously very low curving. But the amount of 1 health minions isn't that high. I think you can quite easily play around the Defile with this deck, especially with the health gain effect of Rockpool and Tideseer.
What about double Defile though? Like, genuinely having the second Defile there means that the first, essentially the first one procs for 2. That's probably almost always a full board clear.
I think even then though, with the way this hand works, like, yes, you get 1 full clear with double Defile.
Right.
Is that good enough? You need to start populating the board, because that is how you beat these board-based aggressive decks. They'll just keep refilling turn and turn again with Book of Spectres, a Luna. But if you dominate the board and start value trading them, or even going aggressive with the Giants, which could happen at some point, that's when you start to really lock out the game. And so I like this play from Shy. It will, I said I like this play from Shy. It will be punished. The fact that a Luneth is actually there is pretty miserable for Hong Kong.
Yep, it's going to be difficult for Hong Kong to survive for too long once this Luneth comes down. I mean, New Zealand do still have a limitation on mana at the moment. Like, they may not even be able to play 3 cards per turn. Well, they should be able to. The Murlocs do tend to be quite cheap.
Like, they're just losing board. That one choice to play the Ooze, which meant he could clear off the extra minions here, start pulling back the board. We can see Gen Greymane next turn, curve into Lich King, curve into Bone Mare, if something sticks, and start really pushing onto the board. I think this is a really great recognition from Shy, that usually they don't have the Luneth, in which case, brilliant, I'm dominating the board. Even if they do have a Luneth though, I'm still just winning the board here.
That's not ideal at all. Having to fireball a minion with this deck feels so bad. Not even buffing up the Murloc Raider so that it can't get value traded. The Homunculus still just destroys it with little effort. And like you said, Gen Greymane is looking just fine this turn. Retriever not even procced yet.
Yeah, I reckon there's a chance we see Spellbreaker Sunfury instead on this turn. Over the Gen Greymane, it softens up the board a little bit and just goes wider, which is very powerful because, again, Hong Kong don't want to play double Defile here. They want to play Defile in like a last-ditch effort to reclaim the board. If they can stay ahead and set up for a very likely chance of hitting Bone Mare, that is the absolute dream, and I think it's just going to work. Although Mage can actually clear off the board here.
Yeah, this
with Bluegill Frostbolt ping, as miserable as it sounds.
This is a pretty good turn, actually. Like, even just Frostbolting the Spellbreaker and is just fine. can leave the Sun Fury alive. I don't think that's... I don't think it's worth putting damage into. Yeah, it's going to make a value trade, but at the end of the day, New Zealand need to actually finish the job at some point.
Yeah, they've got to think about Defile, though. Like, by playing the Blue Guild, do they play into it more? I don't think so. I don't think there's, any way that they can stop a Defile from happening on this board. And so because of the Aluneth, I think they probably just end up playing Blue Guild and shipping it face. Because, like, I think the way it currently stands, the only way they're winning this game, in the vast majority of cases, is Aluneth. Because this, the Warlock very, very likely has the ability to play Lich King or Bone Mare or Defile or Hooked Reaver in the next couple turns. There's so many ways to deal with what's currently in play. So I honestly wouldn't have hated the Blue Guild to come down there for New Zealand.
Well, that Lich King cannot be dealt with this turn, so as you were saying, the only way Mage even has a chance to win this one is the Aluneth. We were saying before that the Mage should be okay in this matchup. The Mage should be great in this matchup. But Shy managed to defend himself very nicely in the early game, and I think that Doomsayer did the majority of the work. And the Ooze, like you said.
Absolutely. I think it was really nice play by Hong Kong. And also just, as we were talking about, the transition from Aggro Mage to Murloc Mage has just been miserable here for New Zealand. They have not been able to get the damage through to phase. It's all been minion focused, which has been so easily dealt with by Shy with the Doomsayer, curving perfectly into the rest of their minions. Here just going nice and wide to set up for a Gul'dan Resurrection on the Void, on the Hooked Reaver as well. They don't even care about getting the +3/+3. Now they're left with a hand that's literally all Murlocs plus a Megasaur. That's probably the happiest Megasaur I've ever seen in my life.
Murlocs just making their way around all of the different classes, aren't they? We're gonna get Murloc Priest at some point.
That was a thing. One of the Danish pirate boys brought it to like Italy, I think. It was. There has been definitely one. There's definitely been one Murloc Priest at a tournament at some point at a tour stop. I remember it.
Did they win any series?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. Maybe I'm misremembering. If any of the Danish pirate boys are watching, I think I remember one of you guys brought it somewhere. But yeah, I will agree. Murlocs are doing the rounds still somehow.
Okay, now, is there a world in which New Zealand just go for Poisonous and try and deal with the Lich King using that right now? I think they just have to, but they didn't get it.
Yeah.
Wind Fury, Taunt, Health, they're all entirely useless against this board.
I think that's a good recognition. Stealth there was kind of the out. Stealth and there being no Defile was the only real way they were going to be able to pull this one back. Because still, Shy does not have to go for Hellfire and Defile. He can just go trade, play the Gul'dan to pull everything back, or Bone Mare push everything phase. There's just no real bad way to do this. I think you just do such a good job of locking out this game. And now, because of his domination of the board, even when he finally loses the board, or if, I should say, if he eventually loses the board, Hellfire double Defile is a board clear every single time.
Yep. I mean, they have 3 Death Knight cards. Like, Mage has no idea what those cards are.
Yeah.
They could all be Death and Decay, for as far as Mage knows. New Zealand looking like they're going to be losing this one. And that is very bad news for them in terms of this overall series.
I don't know. I think I might have been forgetting how good Aluneth is, because I agree it's not looking good for them right now, but I don't think it's over. If we were to see them somehow hitting Stealth or plus Health, or somehow just forcing their opponent to make a big removal turn and then developing again because of the power of Aluneth, they are still in with a shot of pushing for lethal. Although I agree, it's not likely to happen at this point.
It's a good board, though.
It's a very good board.
But yeah, Hellfire plus Defile on its own will clear everything up. Again, New Zealand can sort of restock the board, but these minions are getting a bit on the expensive side now, which sounds ridiculous when I'm looking at 2 and 3 mana minions, but...
When you have a Luneth, you just want the lowest curve you can possibly get.
Oh, exactly. You want the 1-drops and the 2-drops exclusively.
And here we see still holding back on any kind of removal card because, again, why would they need to? They're still just ahead on the board, and they know this is not... It's not even like it's not a control mage. It's not an aggro mage. It doesn't have the primordial glyph to hit a Flame Strike, a Meteor, or a Blizzard. It doesn't have anywhere near enough of the good old removal cards to be clearing off and fighting back on this board, which has always been the weakness of Murloc decks. If you're not ahead, you're losing. You have to stay ahead at all points of the game.
Second fireball hitting a minion this game. Gul'dan sitting there just healing up every single turn.
Yeah.
And this is looking like it's pretty much Mage's final push. That's the second Gentle Megasaur.
And still a Luna demanding more here and trying to keep New Zealand in the game here, but again, I keep coming back to it because of Hong Kong's resistance to play their removal spells, using their minions to dominate the board and the hero power as well. They've just left themselves in a position where even if they start to lose the board, they have that comeback.
Shy just trying to work out which is the best way to deal with all of this, which is the most efficient. Gonna use the first to file. 1 damage off of dealing with the Murloc. Wow, I mean, the death. Sure, why not? I mean, this Death Knight card is particularly good in Even Warlock, and
oh my god,
that's why.
Oh, that's so sick.
No taunts, but Hong Kong just don't need them. Their health, they've still got 29 health.
And our Luneth is showing power overwhelming here for Mage, as it will just be starting to fatigue him in the next few turns, which will mean a very nice, quick way for Shy.
Meine Güte, der Murloc war ne... Haben die alle mit ihren Murlocs hier, ey. Keine Karten mehr, behalte ich.
Such an important victory here for Hong Kong, winning with their own Murloc Mage and then defeating their opponent's Murloc Mage.
These Murloc Mage matches have been really interesting. I am quite excited to see what happens with this deck moving forwards. Winning unfavorables and losing favorables.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I guess you can just go Hellfire. He doesn't even need to go for the file, but whatever. There's always a board clear here. It's difficult to lose this game for Hong Kong.
Can even Demonic Project if he wanted to reduce the amount of Murlocs.
Voila.
Even further. There's the concede.
Boah, draufgegeben.
Of the series, they are 1 win away from
war so beschissen danach.
Semi-finals of the Hearthstone Global Games at Blizzcon.
Has so many. I suppose I should say. So if you put a very strong path to victory in this matchup.
Schurke gegen Schamane.
I just heard a Murloc again in my head, but I think this time it was the hero.
Possibly.
It must be the shaman here. Otherwise, I actually am losing it now. I'm gonna sleep and dream of Murlocs tonight. Okay, thank goodness. Okay. Well, 3 1-drops and Henge Clan is looking like the start that Hong Kong want.
This hand looks like I can just hear Crystallize's diary now, like day 33. They still haven't realized I'm not a mole. As they beautifully play it first, just in case they get down to 5 health before they play the rest of them who can't play it. But this hand for New Zealand, looking pretty good. I liked the mulligan from Hong Kong. Obviously, the Henchland Thug is exactly what you're looking for because the only real answer to it early on is a Hex, which you would very happily throw down as the Shudderwock Shaman player, or maybe an Earth Shock, but that's not that good of a piece of removal. They've still got a 3/3 that they're going to be smacking you about the head with, so I like that mulligan a lot. And then the Volcano for Patra. Again, I think just good understanding of the matchup. You do want to be curving out, but you're not going to throw away your premium removal card.
Again, I like the idea of early Glacier Shards to stall out into a Volcano turn, but there's no Glacier Shard present.
Yeah.
Gluttonous Ooze, perfect. Playing into the Hedge Clan Thug turn. That really does slow Hong Kong down, as they're going to have to consider going a dagger up 1-drop again, as if they just drop Hench Clan Thug, it gets traded into by Gluttonous Ooze.
And man oh man, was this Gluttonous Ooze annoying for Loosefield here. Unable to just go Thug on curve to be able to start really amping up the damage. They have to just spend another turn playing out their minions, playing out the dagger, and that means that the curve from Patra can become very strong. Saronite, Chain Gang, Life Drinker, whatever they want here to start dominating the board. This is exactly what I was talking about as what you want to do in this matchup. What do you think about Life Drinker over Chain Gang there? That was a surprisingly difficult choice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the only advantage I can see really is that the 3/3 body trades better against Crystallizer. However, the upsides of Saronite Chain Gang having 2 taunts on the board, that does seem like a pretty large difference here, especially now we're seeing the Captain Greenskin play. Patra now has nothing on the board. She's going to have to go. Well, I mean, Volcano, I guess, is okay this turn.
And well, this is a really interesting, and I find it a very, very interesting facet of all control decks that have the ability to curve as well. I'm talking about decks like Control Priest with their Twilight Drakes, Shudderwock Shaman here with their Saronite Chain Gang, is you never want to play your best minions before you think you're going to be removing anyway. Like Patria, I think, was thinking on turn 4, I could play Chain Gang as the stronger minion in terms of stats, but there's a really good chance I play Volcano next turn anyway. And I don't want to play my best minion into that. I want to save that for the refill afterwards. And it didn't work out because the Volcano wasn't worth it here in Patra's opinion. But I still like the idea of saving it back for after you go for the big board clear.
It's gonna have to just be Volcano now coming up. The problem is that when you do play Volcano, that overload train starts rolling, and you end up being in the position where you're overloading every single turn just to try and stay on the board, or keep the opponent off of the board, rather.
Yeah, again, a relatively difficult turn there for Patra, as we could have seen Earthshock, Manatide, Hero Power, but just because of the threat of another Cold Blood coming down, Fungal Mancer, maybe the Cobalt Scalebane that I believe we see in Hong Kong's deck list as well. A little bit too much could have gone wrong by not clearing off the board. So I like just starting to run the opponent out of resources, hope they don't have a big development onto the board, and then try and populate the board yourself next turn.
Myra's Unstable Element drawn by Loosefield. Certainly not looking like he's going to want to play that anytime soon, but at some point, after the next few turns, after his hand has dried up a bit, that card could make all the difference.
It could indeed. I had a Miracle Rogue play Myra's Unstable Element against me on turn 5 today after shuffling 6 spiders into the deck.
Did it go well?
No, I won. It was a really bad idea.
Did it just burn all the spiders?
Yeah. It was really stupid. Oh, Zero Mana Electra is very nice, I think.
Yeah, in this matchup it's looking particularly good, whether they want to play it with the Healing Rain. If they get desperate, they can play it with Volcano, but I don't think that's going to be necessary.
Well, just the 8 mana swing turn of Volcano, Electra, Healing Rain will pretty much always destroy the board and heal them back up to full.
I'd just like to say, Patra is doing a great job of getting these taunt totems.
Yeah, I suppose you're right.
It's what she wants in this matchup. She wants to maintain as high a health total as possible.
Round of applause for Patra rolling taunt totems, everybody.
So this is a 1 health over volcano range, I believe. So
yeah.
There's still volcano Earthshock.
Yeah, so probably not worth the Electra volcano is what I'm hearing here.
No, again, I think Electra healing the rain is looking like the way to go a little later.
And I like this a lot from Hong Kong, of just the play it, just throwing as much stuff onto the board this turn as possible. That was one of the lowest value Val spines it's possible to have, but just go for it, because you're going to be playing Myras very likely. Like, in the games where you don't win with this board, you have to play Myras to win, because your redevelopment isn't going to be strong enough. So let's bait out that volcano or that lightning storm that they maybe have, and then just go off with Myras on the next turn.
It's very likely, yeah, that the Myras is going to be the play next turn, so one way or another, this game isn't going to go on for much longer. With the Hench Clan surviving, yep, that's an Earthshock target.
Alter.
Yep, time to go. Do you think, well, with the re-dagger, I guess you can make a somewhat manner efficient play this turn without Myras.
Yeah, like you could actually consider just holding back on it on this turn. Yeah, I think I like the play of the 2-1, because that just pushes a little bit of extra damage on this turn. And you do want as many cards as possible, because if they play Healing Rain, you need that value. Yeah. That one extra card you get could make all the difference. And this is a pretty good hand, actually, to be getting off of the Myras. Edwin with a few cheap cost cards. No Cold Bloods to be found, but the Leroy Jenkins as well is extra burst. This is just a really high value hand.
2 Vicious Fledglings, both volcanoes have been played.
And Patra is going to be struggling, because due to the fact that this is such a high value hand, not just a high burst hand, Hong Kong have got themselves in a situation where Healing Rain is not going to be winning the game for New Zealand. They need removal. It is going to have to be from New Zealand. Lightning Storm found pretty soon, I think, for them to have a chance.
Ow.
Well, maybe 2 Healing Rains will be able to get that. That is a lot of healing.
No idea.
3 Healing Rains. Thanks to the Electra.
Na, was machst du jetzt?
I mean the equivalent of 4 Healing Rains after you Electra back the grumble for Electra. Checkmate.
Well, then Zola's going to be drawn.
Na los.
Oh, fuck, wait, no.
Mach mal schneller.
We're out of Healing Rains.
Lightning can strike twice.
Ach, der Heilregen. Boah! Schlägt da nochmal ruf, Und dann hat noch ein Heilregen, ey. Guck's ja.
When you look at the fact that only, I believe it was 6 healing was gained off of the second healing range due to the Electra effect, there was real consideration to hold back the Electra to go with the next healing rain, because going up to 20
Das könnte eventuell ein Sieg für Neuseeland werden. Wenn ich gleich jetzt was Oberkrasses wieder kommt, ja.
But I guess it's the fact that you get a 3-3 on board with no removal in hand that makes it a lot more tempting of a play. It was close though, I think.
New Zealand needs to draw cards. They are really going to struggle to deal with everything that Loosefield has available to him over the next couple turns. So the Acolyte is going to need to do some serious work.
Yeah. And these really are some of the most difficult turns in Queststroke. Is the first turn after Myras, when you always have 9-10 cards in hand to be working with, and you just have to wonder, what is my game plan here? What am I going for? Do I just launch everything face and try and win the game through burst? Do I try and win board control? How do I try and avoid taking damage myself because I'm dying through to fatigue? How do I meet around my threats here? And I think it was really beautifully done by Hong Kong, where they, in my opinion, correctly realized they need to win the board. They've got to be trading here to get the damage through later on, because they're not just winning through burst. And also played around mind control tech. Just a really nice way of setting up a good board, playing into Fungal Mancer next turn, and getting a lot of damage through the face.
That's just sad. They need to do a lot of maths. They need to work out how they can deal the maximum possible amount of damage in the shortest amount of time. New Zealand picking up the Hex though. can't deal
So
with
schön
more than one of these
leuchtend.
minions, which means they have to choose. Is it
Ja.
the Edwin or is it actually the vicious fledgling that poses the greater threat?
Na, was ist denn jetzt?
I think he's in a bad enough situation. Oh, sorry, Patrick's in bad
Bisschen
enough
überlegen ist ja
situation
gut,
where
ja,
you
aber
can
das ist auch zu
just
lang.
you just have to take the risk. You have to say this fledgling gets nothing. It's just not going to get the good adaptations. It's just going to get, I don't know, untargetable or something every turn, and it's not going to kill me because that Edwin will hit you for 6 every turn. You know that as a certainty, but maybe if you get a little bit lucky, the fledgling won't be quite so devastating.
Also, Schurke, wenn du dich nicht beeilst, dann verreckst du anhand deiner Nullkarten.
If Hong Kong do hit Wind Fury, this is going to get completely out of control.
Kosten, ne?
Yeah, they just have to do it. Like, they're considering anything else, but Fungalmancer on Fledgling has just been one of the most insanely powerful plays for the longest time. And hey, there you go. That is a whole bunch of nothing on the adaptations.
Oh, you caught it. Untargetable.
Well, I kind of called it. I said something useless like untargetable, but it was the one they actually chose. So it's the least useless out of all of them. But yes, I did call it. I still here, they realised by playing into MCT a little bit, we may as well play into it more and give ourselves the highest chance of not giving them the vicious fledgling here, which we really want to keep knocking about.
Alright, this is a big old mind control tech. I was gonna say, I'm surprised they're not attacking first to guarantee this doesn't happen, but...
Genau, den Heilregen noch verwenden.
Maybe they wanted the attack face, like...
Doch nicht.
If they get this, they can
Ja,
just
komm schon.
trade
Mitte
and
wieder
push
voll
the
aus.
space to try and close things out.
Und 30 wieder.
Has to trade and New Zealand are winning.
You can just freeze the vicious fledgling.
Yeah.
Wow.
Und jetzt alles ausspielen, was geht, ne?
I didn't expect the frog
Ja,
to
los.
be the best target there, but
Greif auch mal an, da.
maybe that was the game plan all along. Maybe that was the reason they didn't trade it first.
Because if they do trade here, that definitely makes me more suspicious of the...
Als ob es jetzt darauf noch ankommt.
I don't know, it's close, because then if you kill off the frog and you don't steal the fledgling, I wonder if that gives you more or less chance of having a fledgling not be on their board. But either way,
Und jetzt,
with the
boom.
interface, I love this play.
Ja, nun.
Ja, auf wen denn
How
jetzt?
much damage is
Oh,
to Hong Kong
nee.
in the hand? We've got Deckhand, Deadly Poison, and Leroy Jenkins. That's 10.
Wartet
The
der da so
weapon
lange
is another
immer?
2, 12, plus everything on the board.
Kann nicht wahr sein, ne?
20, it's not lethal. That's not 30.
Surprisingly close, though. Yeah.
24 damage. Not gonna do it.
Giving it the real best shot here, but they are obviously going to be realizing they have to trade here, have to eliminate every single attacking minion off this board, or they will die, taking 4 fatigue damage next turn. Not even the meager
Boah,
glacial
jetzt
shards can
tut er auch
survive.
Schlag
I
auf
think
Schlag,
people
ja,
will
sonst wird
realise
alles nehmen.
They don't have the ability to clear off everything whilst also setting up lethal on the following turn, especially not after the
Jetzt will er hier richtig abgehen, ey.
Like, this is just so miserable. They can stay alive technically, but it is by the absolute skin of their teeth. If the chain gang weren't here though, however, this could actually potentially be lethal next turn with the fledgling hitting Wind Fury. Or even if it didn't hit Wind Fury, this is a lot of damage on board. Oof.
Ooh.
Agatha can do some work. Quite a lot of work.
15.
Hopp, hopp.
Yeah, the damage just isn't there to close out. That is going to be
Lange
easy
kann
to
man da
make it
warten.
for. There is just nothing that Hong Kong can do here. This was surprisingly close. I think
immerhin.
lovely
Bisschen
timing
ausgedüngt.
on the Myra's Unstable element and a really good post Myra's Unstable element set of plays.
Ja, der nächste
by
Zug
Hong Kong here and loose field. But they know here, there's just nothing.
Läuft scheiße. Ich glaube kaum, dass du dich noch retten kannst, Joker. Ja,
Well, there you go.
reicht doch.
Arthur ties things up. It's 2 and 2.
Yay.
This is the type of series that we want to see in the
Fassbar, es ist Gleichstand wieder.
The reason why Odd Paladin is having such a renaissance.
Nächstes Spiel bringt die
is what
Entscheidung.
you're looking for, because while it is not,
Schamane
I
gegen
completely
Paladin.
agree with you, Mr. Falcone, as good as Wild Pyromancer in this deck to just get that sweeping AoE effect, it's perfectly good enough to start
Da
dominating
ist der
the board. You can
Killeset.
curve Keleseth into Manatide, Chain Gang, whatever else, and use a couple of lightning storms along the way to help pull the board in your favor. You can just win board control pretty convincingly.
Level up.
None will survive.
Yeah, Keleseth into Saonai Chain Gang with Earthshock in hand is a relatively okay start.
Ach, das wird ja wieder ein schnelles Match anscheinend.
The light dims. We fight.
Righteous Protector into Hero Power into very cheap Corridor Creeper at some point though. Also a very good start.
Yeah, this is looking like a nice hand for Mage. Finding the level up right at the start is the dream. Exactly what you want against these slightly slower control decks, because it just means that all these 1/1s that are knocking about on board all of a sudden become very, very real threats in their own right. And man, this start of Hong Kong, while I was saying New Zealand are off to a good start, this is just the dream for Hong Kong. They're dominating the board. The Healing Totem is the perfect role as well to start pulling ahead more on board, and curving into Chain Gang. Like, there's no guarantee that New Zealand are even going to be ahead on board coming into turn 5.
And that's exactly what I was saying just before this game started. That is the potential the Shadowwalk Shaman has. If the Paladin start isn't quite as explosive as it does tend to be, then yeah, Saonai Chain Gang is an awkward body for the Silverhand recruits to deal with.
And so now the slightly weirder plays are going to be being considered by New Zealand. Do they just go raid leader here, trade it in? What can your opponent do to punish that you can't respond with? It's never something you really want to do because you want to play that with a wide board, but it's worth considering. Do they go Stonehill Defender as they were looking at? Do they go Hero Power Blessing of Might? There are a lot of different options here to be looked at.
Move quickly.
And it seems...
Even just Void Ripper, just kill off the healing.
Right, well it seems as though New Zealand don't know what to do, as we are seeing the full extent of the rope here. Sunkeeper Tarim is a snap pick, as it often is in Odd Paladin. It's just premium. Yes, it may have an even cost, but it's one of the best cards in this deck.
New Zealand go for the Blessing of Might and just ship it face. The absolute mad lads.
They know the place. Next turn's looking really awkward for New Zealand though. Getting past these Saonai Chain Gangs is not going to be an easy feat.
This is what happens when you're playing an odd deck and you hit an even mana curve. Do you want to play a 3-drop and a 1-drop? Not really. It's not like Odd Rogue where you want to press your hero power, but usually you pressed it on turn 2 anyway, so you don't need to do it again later. But this deck, you want to press the hero power every single turn. However, this is a pretty nice consolation.
With what I hadn't realized was how cheap the Corridor Creeper was going to be after making this play. No, this is pretty fantastic. New Zealand back in the driving seat for now, though there is a lightning storm for Hong Kong. Shadowwalk is there, ready to go on turn 9.
Maya.
It's not looking too bad. Do you think Blizzcon... Oh, I was going to say, do you think he needs to play for board, or do you think he needs to start digging through his deck? But okay, can actually hex that Corridor Creeper.
Yeah, I like this. I think it's... so you've seen a Stonehill Defender come down, so maybe there's something a little bit bigger that comes off of that, like a Tyrion. But I think generally it's going to be fairly mid-sized. Obviously, if they have Tarim, they're going to take it, which is a good hex target, but usually the least of your concerns when you've just been Tarimed.
Right.
So I like just using that there to start winning back the board. You can't afford to use a Lightning Storm there, because that is way more valuable than a hex up against the very wide boards of Odd Paladin.
Now he's just going to try and work out what is the best thing he can do to get a proper grip on this board. And what does he need to be playing around? Does he need to be playing around Lightning Storm? Does he need to be playing around Mind Control Tech?
Well, like the play I'm looking at most heavily is Hero Power Raid Leader on this turn, and then you go Lost in the Jungle level up on the next turn.
Tschüss,
However, against a
Kenneth.
deck that can so effectively deal with a wide board of 3/3 Silverhand recruits, you really want to be attacking with them on the turn you buff them up.
Agreed.
And I suppose whether he'd gone for Lost in the Jungle or Raid Leader, both would have been
Jo,
Look
Massenvernichtung.
at this Manatide Totem. The buff from the Kaliseth makes all of the difference here, as this is going to be a Silverhand Recruit Slayer Totem. While drawing cards at the same time. Just a little bonus.
doesn't even die to the Void Ripper.
Reporting for duty.
He's going to go for it anyways, turning this Manatide Totem into a Dusk Boar that draws a card. And now for Blitzcon, until he can lead up to that tempo Shadowwalk. For the moment, it's not looking all that great. He just needs to try and stay even on the board, not fall too far behind until he can just let rip. I imagine with 9 mana for 3 6/6s, it's not amazing, but in this matchup you don't need the full effect of the OTK Shadowwalk combo.
So Fungal Mancer plus Atris Veteran isn't looking too bad at all here. Buffing up one of these recruits to just equally trade with a Saronite, buffing up the Void Ripper to just value trade, and then the remaining 1/1 can deal nicely with the Manatide Totem. Doesn't really put them ahead by much, but it deals with what has become a pretty threatening board from Hong Kong.
Yeah, I can respect that. I think I like any play that doesn't involve Tarim on this turn, because anytime you're playing Tarim, it should be basically winning you the game. It's just the most absurdly powerful swing turn available to you. And so I think waiting for you to have a whole bunch of 1/1s on board, taking it a little bit slower, is a really nice way of playing this for Mage, because he doesn't need to play quickly. He doesn't need to go all in and then be blown out by a volcano. Whereas he could just take it slower, get those hero powers in every single turn, and you will quickly realize the sustainability of Odd Paladin. It just goes on and on and on.
Lightning can strike twice.
Ah, look at that. Hong Kong just doing whatever they can to get themselves onto the board. Even just playing Electra without its ability. But hey, it's a 3-mana 4/4. It seems pretty good here.
This turn looks fairly prescriptive to me of just Raid Leader Hero Power Purifiers more.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like a really nice way to, I mean, protects you against Hagatha, protects you against Lightning Storm.
It's weak to Volcano.
Really afraid of Volcano, yeah, that's the thing that could go very wrong there. And that would be bad. That would be the last thing you want to see.
I think that is the way to go. Like, again, you've said it a few times over the course of today, Derek, but you as a Hearthstone player, you have to work around you have to work out what is the correct card to be playing around, and which cards can you not afford to play around. And as we can see in this position, the Purifier's Maul does look like it would be winning the game pretty much. Mage is going to go with Tarim though. As you said, some people Tarim needs to be saved for when you're just winning the game outright. But
well,
hey, it looks like it's winning the game.
Yeah, like, it doesn't need to be saved for lethal, it just needs to be saved for a position where it's very, very difficult for your opponent to come back from.
It's this play is much weaker to Hagatha.
It is.
But there's 2 Volcanoes in the deck and only 1 Hagatha.
And also, you had a board that completely died to Hagatha on the last turn, on turn 8. I think New Zealand will very correctly have realized there is no way they have Hagatha in hand unless it comes as the 1 card off the top, which generally you don't play around in Hearthstone unless you're miles and miles ahead. And like you said, Mage can't play around everything here, so I can totally understand the reasoning to play around the Hagatha, to play around Volcano but not Hagatha here.
Right. Leaves Hong Kong a little bit stuck here. They're just going to drop Shadowwalk. I'm not even sure which battle cries
verspielst du.
are going to help them out in this position. They played.
2 Chain Gangs goes a little bit wider.
I don't think we've seen a mind control tag. I mean, there's a very real chance that New Zealand will just have lethal next turn.
How much damage they're looking at 15
Jetzt
plus
könnt ihr
5,
eigentlich...
20.
It is
Ja,
definitely with
könnt ihr
levels
Level
and
abspielen
leader,
eigentlich.
that is going to be lethal as after what has been an incredibly long series,
Und das war's.
Rage and New Zealand have done it. They found a way. The odds seem to be stacked against them for a long time, but they found a way to qualify for the Hearthstone
Zeeland
Global Games
gewinnt.
2018 finals,
Jawohl.
eliminating Hong Kong after their incredible run
Tja.
themselves.
And there we have it. Another team joining the top 4 here as we now have China, Brazil and New Zealand in the top 4 before we find out who our final
Neuseeland macht's.
semi-finalist will be as the final match of the day later on. But I have to say, very well done to New Zealand there. I liked that last game a lot, where especially just that final